for the glory of old state, for her founder strong and great, for the future that we wait. Raise the song, great is the song.
Sing our love and loyalty,
Sing our hopes that bright and free.
rest, O Mother dear, with thee, all with thee, all with thee.
Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the Penn State Alumni Association's People of Penn State podcast. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State Network. You can find the People of Penn State podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. Subscribe and give us a rating. Ratings and reviews actually help others find these great stories. And boy, do we have a great story to pass on to you today. Today, I'm joined by Dan Berlin. Dan is an enterprising entrepreneur, an investor, a philanthropist, and an endurance athlete who just so happens to also be blind. He believes in creating opportunities and giving back around the globe. Dan gradually lost his eyesight from cone rod dystrophy. He was diagnosed at 7 years old and became legally blind in his late 20s. After more than 12 years of working around the globe in a large multinational corporation, he co-founded Rodelle, a world-leading vanilla extract company, which sold to Archer Daniels Midland Company in 2018, and Dan subsequently exited as the CEO. Since then, he's the co-founder and president of Team C Possibilities, a nonprofit organization which empowers young people with vision loss to thrive by providing scholarships and mentorship to high-achieving college students who are visually impaired. Please welcome Dan Berlin to the People of Penn State podcast. Dan, how are you today?
Oh, great. And thank you, Paul. Super great to be here with you.
Let's share with people, first of all, where you're joining us from today.
Yeah, I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado, home of Colorado State University. It's great. Not quite the same as being in Happy Valley, but we'll take it.
A couple thousand miles actually away from Happy Valley, but I'm sure Happy Valley still lives in your heart. Let's start at the beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, ended up finishing high school in Hershey. And it was the place I always wanted to go. I really didn't think of anything else coming out of high school. It was, Penn State was it for me from the start.
I know you were involved in some student organizations here. You're a member of a fraternity. What were you involved in here at Penn State?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't in the Greek life at Penn State, although I enjoyed it. But I had a bit of a unique major in the fact that I was a food science major, which was super cool. It's one of the benefits that Penn State has with being such a great institution is majors that are a little bit off the beaten path. I love science coming out of high school. Couldn't quite decide whether I wanted to go into chemistry or biology. And then I came across food science, and it's a major that combines engineering with physics, with chemistry, with microbiology, all in a way that's very applied to, what we eat. And just fantastic.
So thinking back to your time at Penn State, what were some of your favorite memories as a student here?
Well, the one thing that was great is being a food science major, our degree program was housed in the same building as the creamery. So that was always great. One of my academic advisors was the manager of the creamery back then, which was cool. But, my best memories of Penn State, honestly, are not even memories. They're what I live today. They're the people I've met. Just diverse group of people from all over the state and all over the world that are, still friends today, decades later.
This is the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Dan Berlin. He is an entrepreneur and the co-founder and president of Team C Possibilities. We're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. But Dan, I mentioned in the intro you were diagnosed at age 7, but didn't become legally blind until your late 20s. Talk a little bit about that process. What was that like for you, physically, emotionally, mentally, to gradually lose your sight?
Yeah, it was tough. And I say over the years, my perspective has changed. And I look back at myself then and kind of wonder why I did some of the things I did. But trying to be in those shoes as a 7-year-old or a high school student or college student, um, I tried to put myself back in those shoes to think about why I was doing the things I did. I hid it. I tried not to let anybody know all through high school and college into my working career that I was losing my eyesight. Of course, I knew. A few people close to me knew, but not very many. And it was a struggle. I just always looked like I just had to work harder. I think I trained myself in problem solving pretty early by dealing with vision loss, but yet not going out into the community and asking for help through that process. Subsequently, by the time I was in my late 20s and really couldn't fake it anymore, and I just had to come out and use my cane, and really change my working situation. That really changed my life. It was so freeing and liberating. And it's one of the things that I talk a lot about now with young people who are facing this, saying, it's okay. It's okay to be yourself. Just be you. None of us chose how we came into this world, but we can choose how we live in this world.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about your life as an adventure athlete. Were you an adventure athlete? Were you into the outdoors all through high school and college, or was this something that you took on kind of later in life?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would have answered that question no several years ago, but I spent a lot of time thinking back to my life between the age of like 5 and 15, and growing up in rural Pennsylvania. I was outdoors all the time.
Right.
I look at my life between the age of 5 and 15, and I pretty much have come back around, at 45 to 50, living the same way I did then, outside, on trails, out in nature. So I think it was something that I rediscovered, probably in my late 30s.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I would never describe myself as outdoorsy. But as I think back to being a kid, right, you were always ankle deep in a creek somewhere, right, or fishing or walking with your friends. Like we lived again, rural Pennsylvania, walking with your friends on a trail in the woods, and that's just what you did every day. And so, I think my experience was similar. I wouldn't have described myself as an outdoors person or as an adventurer like you are today, but much of our life here is spent outside when we're young.
It is. It's one of the things I think we underappreciate. Where we are in Pennsylvania is the access to the outdoors and how beautiful it is. It's one of the things that I remember being at Penn State and taking lots of trips to different state parks around the area and spending a lot of time outdoors, even though at the time I may not have considered myself, an outdoorsy person. But I love the fact that I've been able to rediscover that and just rediscover it in a different way.
Yeah, it's one of the blessings of living here in Happy Valley, in the Nittany Valley, where you can access the state parks that are here or climb Mount Nittany. There's a lot of things to do outdoors. I know similar, if not even more ever present where you live in the world.
It is. I mean, life is outdoors out here. I found that, so many people, the reason they come to Colorado is to be in the mountains, on the slopes, on the trails, just outside. And it's beautiful. It really is.
So you're a 1992 food science graduate. Where did that take you after Penn State?
Oh, it's interesting. It took me to work at Hershey Foods. I worked at Hershey Foods all the way through college. I paid for a significant amount of my college by working summers and breaks in the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup chocolate factory, which is outstanding. It took me about 4 or 5 years to go back to eating peanut butter cups, but they're now my favorite again. But
how many years did it take to get the smell out of your clothes and your hair and everything?
Oh, I can't say for sure, but it was a long time. But I got to say, I miss it now. So And it's funny that I went from chocolate companies to owning a vanilla extract company, but I'm still a chocolate fan at heart.
So how did that happen? How did you leave Hershey and get into the vanilla business?
Yeah, so I ended up getting a master's degree at University of Delaware, and then from there, it was an interesting story. I met my wife at University of Delaware, and I was set to head on to graduate school. Really thought about going into academics, and I had to make that once in a lifetime decision. Do I follow my career path or academic path down to North Carolina, or do I follow my at then time girlfriend, now wife and best friend, to New York City for a job offer she had? And I chose New York City, and that got me into a series of positions, which ended up with a division of Pfizer in their specialty chemical division, and then into several other companies through acquisitions along the way.
So how does one go about launching a vanilla extract company, right? I mean, you work. I think of the food industry now, and I think of them as these large corporations like Hershey, like Kraft, right? And yet your company was essentially a startup. How do you get into that game as a kind of growing startup?
Well, it's interesting. And I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit. I always wanted to create and do things on my own, or figure out what it would take to do that. I do see a tremendous amount of value for working for large corporations in the process. As it said, we need to learn the rules in order to know how to break them. And that's really what it comes down to. At some point, I needed to make the leap and go and do it. And I had a friend who was a business colleague of mine at the time. He was out here in Colorado. He was working for a small spice blending company, and just working together, he said, hey, why don't we do this together? And so we ended up joining forces, buying this small spice blending company, focusing in specifically on vanilla extracts, eventually selling off all the other spice businesses that we had, and really moving forward to setting up companies in Uganda and Madagascar and other parts of the world to just vertically integrate the supply chain. And it was fascinating. I look back, I was listening to an interview yesterday. It was part of a class, and they were saying how important small, certain things are to consumers today, like ESG, environmental social governance.
Right.
We look back at our company. I mean, we were doing this in 2004 and 2005. So I think the way that we focus on being a small company competing in a big company world is by having our niche, having focus, really being at the best at what we do, at whatever the one thing is that we do really, really well. And for us as a vanilla company, it was connecting the growers with the consumers in the US. So our niche, what we did very well, is focused on the best quality we could possibly make by being on the ground and involved with the people that were actually growing vanilla, and then bringing that message, bringing that connection, back to the consumers in the States.
And some of those growers of vanilla are in some of the more beautiful places in the world, right? When I think of vanilla production, I think Madagascar, I think French Polynesia, which aren't bad places to spend some time.
No, I would say Madagascar is a fascinating place. And Madagascar and a lot of work in Uganda really sparked my love for Africa and the continent, and the work I do over there now. But we also got to realize that Madagascar is, I want to say, it's the 8th poorest country in the world. Right. It's one level above Haiti on economically in the world, and it can be a tough place to work and do business. It's one of the things where we brought a lot of care into what we did, is to create processes where the farmers and the growers benefited from the world market, not just their local market. And tough situations to change, but very valuable in making those changes. I mean, we live in a world today where everyone could be connected.
Right. Yeah. When you think of major corporations and their corporate responsibility and social responsibility initiatives that they have, that means something different in a place like Madagascar than it does in the Silicon Valley or in Seattle.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Another thing that was funny, looking back at our company, we introduced wind power as our source of electricity
Yeah.
back in 2005. So we were working on this alternative energy production facility powering, a decade and a half before it's become all the rage. And I think that's what small companies can do. We didn't think about making a political statement, or we didn't think about, what was, why we should be doing. We just thought that this is something our consumers would care about. And we were small enough and quick enough to be able to just do it, to just make it happen. And I think that's something that a lot of small companies can do much better than larger companies today.
So a lot of startups, launch with kind of different ends in mind, right? But in 2018, your company was acquired. Was that the initial goal of starting the company, right? Build something so that it could eventually be to be acquired, or was that something that happened because of the good work that you were doing and the competition that you were providing in the marketplace?
Yeah, great question. It was by no means our goal at starting out to be acquired. In fact, my business partner and I had quite a lot of struggle with this when the opportunity showed up. We were really getting to a scale where our largest customers had become so large that we needed capital to grow and to expand. And we had been through this 2 or 3 times. So we decided that now's the time we need to go out and raise some money. Before this, we were very self-funded and grew everything organically. It was a tough decision, to go that route. And we looked at all of our options and we realized to get to the next level, we had about 100 employees at the time. And really, to take care of our employees, get to the next level, and be able to serve our customers long into the future, we needed some significant scale into year two. And we were very fortunate to join paths with a company like ADM that at heart is a farmer driven company. They take products farmers produce and turn them into food products that are used by consumers around the world. And that fit right in line with what we were looking for in our model. So absolutely no regrets in taking the steps we did. It was a tough decision. But now looking back through our COVID world of the past year and things like that, very thankful and grateful that the opportunity came up, because they were able to handle it, take care of employees, and do so many things that is one of the benefits a large company can do, that a small company would struggle with a little bit more.
You said earlier in the interview about one of the benefits of working with a large corporation is you get to learn the rules so you know how to break them, right?
Exactly.
It seems to me like that might be applicable to your work at Team C Possibilities, right? And instead of using the word rules, like let's insert the word perceptions, right? You have to understand what the perceptions are of visually impaired people before you can break down those perceptions. And as I've learned more about you and about Team C Possibilities, it is about really confounding the expectations and perceptions that people have of the blind community. Talk a little bit about the origin story around Team C Possibility.
Yeah, will do. I was very fortunate to grow up with the condition that I have and be able to use that life experience to find meaning and be a way to give back. So we had originally formed Team C Possibilities, taking on just some of these really hard endurance challenges around the world. It was a group of friends, 3 friends and me, that started. Our first idea was to run rim to rim to rim across the Grand Canyon and back, all in one shot. And so we took that on in 2014. And it was after that we got a lot of positive press and people were really interested in what we were doing. And the fact that I was blind and doing this, and maybe the first blind person to ever do it, drew a lot of attention. And then we looked, okay, how can we use this attention for positive good? And we said, okay, well, who are the folks that could be most impacted in the best way with this? And we realized this was children who are blind and the parents and support group that are directly around them could most benefit from hearing stories about what's possible. So we created the organization, really taking on endurance challenges all around the world and speaking with families and children who are blind, just sharing some ideas of what's possible and this message of, don't listen to how you're labeled. Define your own labels, write your own labels, but don't listen to what somebody tells you can and can't do. Just figure it out and do your best. And we were trying to become role models out there in doing just that.
And how has that grown now over the years? When I talked about in the introduction, it's turned into scholarship programs, it's turned into mentorship. It's really grown from it's really grown from kind of these adventure experiences into having an impact on numerous others.
Definitely. And that's the thing. I mean, we started this out not to start a nonprofit. We started this out because it was something that me and my friends loved to do. And we got a lot of positive attention and then tried to figure out how could we use that in the most meaningful, positive way possible. We've then grown that attention into starting a scholarship program for vision impaired college students across the country. And we have our first international student in the program this year. And we provide scholarships, mentorship in the form of monthly mentor calls with highly successful individuals who are blind or familiar with blindness. And most importantly, a peer-to-peer network and support group. We realized that just as what I left Penn State with, the most valuable thing I left the school with was connections to good friends. And that's what we're trying to do for these students who are blind all around the country. Many of them are the only kid in their class who's blind, sometimes the only one in their school. And having a like life experience person to chat with is so powerful for these young folks. And what we ask in return is that these young folks are the role models for the next generation, for the generation of elementary, middle, and high school kids coming up through with vision loss. And to see that it's possible to major in computer science, it's possible to major in pre-law, and it's possible to major in physics or mathematics or any of these great fields of study that our students are part of. And we ask them to share their stories so that the next generation can really see what's possible out there.
And is that how, so folks who are familiar with programming through the Alumni Association have heard the name Susan Robinson before. She's a force of nature here in the Penn State community. Is that how you and Susan connected?
Yeah, Susan is awesome. And Susan and I actually overlapped at Penn State in University Park by, I would say, 2 or 3 years, but didn't know each other then. Both had very similar vision impairments at the time. And it was just a very, fortuitous connection that happened a few years ago where Susan and I, came in touch with each other. And she's a great person, and what she does for the school is fantastic. And she's one of our mentors. It gives you the example of the quality and type of people we bring on to mentor our students who are going through this in their college years.
And when I think about Susan, it's hard not to think about tandem cycling and giving the work that she's doing in New York City with her In Tandem bike nonprofit. You are also the co-founder of a tandem cycling effort with Team C2C, which participated in the Race Across America, the toughest bike race in the world. And your team was able to complete that in an amazing 7 days and 15 hours. Team C2C is now producing a documentary on that project. Talk a little bit about that effort, not only in putting the team together and then competing, but then also telling that story through film.
Sure, would love to. And this was a combination of my friend Jack Chen and I. Jack was at Google at the time. He's totally blind. He's now assistant general counsel for Facebook ads. So just a real powerhouse, intelligent, athletic, and the two of us just really hit it off from day one. we looked at the situation out there. I've been dealing a lot with Team C possibilities and doing a lot working with students. We said, what happens when the students graduate? And the reality of the world today, in the most developed country in the world, is that 70% of people like me don't work, can't find a job. And we thought that, well, this is crazy, with technology advancing the way it has and the way it continues to advance. It's not about being able to get to the job that makes us, or it's not about, doing the job that makes us disabled. It's about having the access to get to the information that is the disability. And technology is overcoming that disability very quickly. So we challenged ourselves to find what's something that's the hardest thing we could think of to do. And we were both cyclists. We came across Race Across America, which is known as the toughest bike race in the world. It's 3,100 miles from Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland. And it's done nonstop, just one stage the whole way through.
Wow.
So we thought, well, let's go ahead. Let's put together a team of 4 blind cyclists on tandem bikes to compete in this race. And we instantly learned a lot. It was easier for us to find blind cyclists that could ride across the country. It was much more difficult for us to find blind cyclists that were employed in careers that were, really exciting out there.
Right.
And that to us was a red flag. We said, okay, well, we need to really focus this whole thing on employment. We started out that way. We doubled down our effort. And we did the race. Yeah, we had a cutoff of 9 days. We had a target of 8 days, and we finished in, like you said, about 7.5 days. So super excited about that. We brought a film crew with us and are just in the final stages of creating a full-length documentary film, really focused around the race, the struggles that go through with putting this together. And the message we're sending here is it's not blindness that would prevent us from doing a race like this. In fact, it can help enhance the experience. And then paralleling that to life in the corporate or professional world, we want to change that sense of that initial notion, that sense of what's possible. When interviewing somebody who's blind or disabled in any fashion, we need to get past this hesitation and resistance about how am I going to get them, into our group, and what liability do I have, and all these, scary perspectives. And we need to start thinking about from the sense like, what fascinating ideas are they going to bring to the team that we don't have? What life perspective do they have that they're going to contribute in ways that nobody else does? And when we change that dynamic, it really opens up the sense of possibilities and what can be done.
Yeah, Susan and I talk about this often, and it's even before you get to some of those questions as an employer, that there are other barriers in place for the blind community. So I think about applying to Penn State, for example. If you're applying for a job here, as you read down through the job description, right at the end it says driver's license required. And Susan and I talk about this, like, well, there's no real reason for somebody who's visually impaired to have a driver's license or to be even able to get a driver's license. And so there's a barrier before that person even applies to see that they are, quote unquote, not qualified based on the job description.
Yeah, no, and I'd say these things aren't intentionally there,
right,
but raising the awareness that they are there really helps. And when we look in the country today, when we look at the US today, we have an aging population and thousands of people losing their eyesight every day. We have a growing population of vision impaired individuals here. Changing that perception and that dynamic is helping an increasing number of people, that we're interacting with day to day. It shouldn't be something where, we talk about, if somebody's in a wheelchair and there's only steps to get up in the building, they're not disabled because they're in a wheelchair. They're disabled because there's no ramp into the building.
right.
Well, we can put a ramp in, now the disability disappears. And that's what we're looking to do. We can use technology. We can use the resources we have to create a greater sense of accessibility, and what that brings is benefits for all.
Absolutely, and that's the point that I think needs to be reinforced by what might appear to be an accommodation for others actually makes things better for everybody. It's not an impediment for those who don't need that. It's something that enhances, the world around us for everybody, so that everybody can have the kind of equal access that we who enjoy whatever privilege we enjoy. But Susan says, the cuts in the sidewalks make it safer for everybody. The things that we don't think about, but that really enhance the world for all of us.
Yep, it truly does. Truly does. And I mean, and that's what we're out here to do. In general, I can't recall ever meeting anyone that, maliciously didn't want somebody who was blind or somebody who was in a wheelchair to thrive. However, there's a lot of people that they don't know how to act, or they don't know what's proper, and then therefore they're afraid of offending someone too. So they're actually acting, out of compassion, but it's turning into a, maybe a not reinforcing positive situation. And the idea is, let's just become more familiar with it. Let's get more role models out there. Let's get more examples of integration and success out there in the world. And these things start to fade away quickly when people in the general population, general society, just become more comfortable with it. And we're at that tipping point. We're getting close to that tipping point here.
So you mentioned the film is about to be wrapped up. You're a guy who strikes me as somebody who uses adventure to highlight some of the issues that we're talking about today. So what's the next adventure? What's next on the horizon for you?
Well, we are working on, with Team C Possibilities, we're working on Antarctica. We have Antarctica and Europe to go as our last two continents to take on an endurance challenge. We had one planned in Scotland for May of 2020, but of course that got scratched for now. So that is what's next, is really starting the logistics, the planning, and just determining what that's going to look like. We don't have that nailed down yet. We always take the approach, and my friend Charles always says, if it excites and intimidates you, go for it. And that's where we are now. This Antarctica, it's exciting, it's intimidating, and it's something we're just figuring out how to do.
This is the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Dan Berlin. He's the co-founder and president of Team C Possibilities. Dan, we like to have a lightning round. We like to have a little bit of fun here at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to throw some questions at you and just see what the first thing that comes to mind is for you.
Go for it. I won't overthink it.
So what was your favorite class at Penn State?
Oh, favorite class at Penn State was probably sensory science.
How about, if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Oh, I would have dinner with my wife, probably in Paris, and just because love spending time together.
How about your most unusual "we are" moment, that kind of unexpected or unusual place where you heard somebody yell out "we are" and it caught you by surprise?
Oh, that's a good one. A couple years ago, probably 3 years ago, we were in France and we went to visit the monastery, Saint Michel, along the coast, the one where the tides come in and surround the castle with water and then they flow out. And my son was wearing a Penn State sweatshirt. And we're walking up the steps and a guy turns the corner and goes, "Wow, you go to Penn State? Wow, my son goes there too." And it was fascinating. We were like the last place, and then the top of a castle on the coast of France. We bumped into somebody who was a super excited Penn Stater.
How about your favorite Penn State sport?
Oh, my favorite, it's got to be wrestling.
Okay.
I love it.
That's my favorite too. Big wrestling fan here.
Yeah.
It's hard to be from northeastern Pennsylvania or central Pennsylvania where you grew up and and not be a big wrestling fan.
Exactly.
And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
I did own a vanilla extract company. But that being said, I think it's anything chocolate. I'm a non-particular chocolate fan. So if it's chocolate, it's my favorite.
That's amazing. Do you know the most popular flavor sold at the creamery is vanilla?
I'm happy to hear that.
Well, Dan, if people want more information about Team C Possibilities and the good work that you're doing there, where can they find that?
Oh, yeah. Just look us up at teamcpossibilities.com or search for us on Instagram or Facebook. We keep up a relatively robust social media presence there. And we have links to our application. So if you happen to be or know of a blind college student, our application is going to open up again in March for the 22 calendar school year. And if you'd like to get involved, we'd love to have you help. It takes all of us to make a difference.
For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you can see the link for Team C Possibilities scrolling on the bottom of your screen right now. So go ahead and check them out and get involved with the great work that Dan is doing. Dan, thank you for allowing us to share your story on the People of Penn State podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's really great being here. I appreciate all you do.
And if you like this episode, I hope you'll subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating and drop us a review. Help us spread the word and share the podcast with your friends and fellow Penn Staters via social media channels, and tag the Penn State Alumni Association with @PennStateAlums. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you for your support. If you're not yet a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are.
When we stood at childhood's gate, shapeless in the hands of fate, thou didst mold us, dear old state, dear old state, dear old state.